words and colors can affect the soul on the spiritual in art. Kandinsky is talking about different levels in which we can experience something. He gives the example of a tree. He calls this the Gegenstand. The object is a tree. We can see it, of course, with our eyes. And this is something that Heidegger also talks about, right? The Begegnen. We encounter something, we see something. Kandinsky says that the tree that we're actually seeing is the materialized form. We see the real tree. And in Heidegger, the parallel to that is leibhaft da, bodily there. The real tree is in front of us. But then Kandinsky goes a step further. Another level is you hear the word Baum in German and tree in English. And he said, what happens when you do that, you get an abstract image in your head when you hear the word tree. And he calls it the dematerialized tree. So what we're having really is the spiritual. And again, we have a parallel to Heidegger, where he is saying it is what you imagine. He's talking about that as well. But then Kandinsky goes into a more spiritual realm. He goes beyond that as well. And he goes into a mystic, very deeply spiritual aspect of it. He says, when you repeat a word several times, like the word Baum, tree, and you say that several times, Baum, Baum, Baum. If you do that long enough, you actually forget about the meaning of the word and start reacting just to the sound. And he calls that the pure sound, or the innere Klang, the inner sound. So the outer sound is just the word that means something, but you can divorce that word from the meaning, and it gets into a bit of a meditative aspect, right? And he calls this the spiritual characteristics of the word, that the sound of the word itself causes vibrations in your mind. Which brings him then to music, which is, of course, sound divorced from an object that exists in the real world. It isn't tied to a tree or to a candle or a box of matches or anything. It is just pure sound, which he says causes eine geistige Atmosphäre. What does that mean? A spiritual atmosphere. Just like the word, right? When you hear a word and you repeat it, it causes a spiritual atmosphere. But so does music, right? You sit back and you let the sounds of the symphony orchestra just wash over you. That is the inner meaning and a spiritual atmosphere. And he gives the example of Wagner, a leitmotif, where he causes, by just combinations of sounds, he causes what Kandinsky calls the spiritual atmosphere that is associated with a character. So even before you see the character, you already associate an atmosphere with a character. Now, he draws a comparison also between music and painting, because he's going to make the jump from music to painting pointing out the similarities and differences. The goal is to say that colors in art and forms can also cause vibrations, and the artist is really the musician that makes human souls vibrate. He is claiming you can do that with sound, but you can also do that with forms and colors. What are the differences? We have been talking in this group a lot about time. Kandinsky says that music is reliant on time because it is a progression, right? A note after another. So that is something that music has, is that aspect of time, but he said that painting does not really have that. But the advantage that painting has is you can see the whole work at once, which in music, of course, you can't do that. You have time slots, right? If a note happens, another note happens, another note happens. On the other hand, I would like to argue with that a little bit, because in a painting too, yes, you can see on the one hand the whole thing at once, but you can also at the same time have eye movements. You jump from one painted element to another. So I would not say that a painting is completely devoid of time either, because I think it can go in both directions. Then Kandinsky goes into painting. And of course, one of the key elements in painting is color. Take a set of watercolors or a set of colored pencils, right? That is one of the main means of expression in art, is color. But here again, he distinguishes. He says, on the one hand, there is the purely physical reaction that people have to color. And he compares it to touching ice, like an ice cube or something hot. And he said that's just superficial. And it ends as soon as you stop touching the ice, or when you move your fingers away from the hot stove, right? It ends after a certain time. He calls that the purely physical effect of color. And he compares this to taste and touching ice. It is superficial and of short duration. But here comes the kicker. Beyond that is what he calls the psychische, the psychic or psychological aspect of color. And he calls that vibration of the soul. Something that really, really touches your heart very, very deeply. He also calls it a Gemütserschütterung. An Erschütterung really is more than a vibration. It's a really strong vibration. You get touched very deeply. His point is that certain colors, all colors, touch our souls very directly in the same way that music can. There's an outer meaning and an inner meaning. And the inner meaning is what touches our soul. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Dankeschön.
The spiritual, the mystical, and related to sound and vibration, that is so fundamental to pulling in quantum storytelling.
Oh, okay. Oh, here's a candle. You know that there is this inner meaning, this inner sound that something makes. And it extends to absolutely everything. You know, man-made, everything he said has that vibration in it, where you go to the essence of something that can resonate with us. And everything has an essence and a spirit